They called Isabella worthless, slapped her in a marble foyer, and offered her only $50,000 to disappear. But Ethan Sterling had no idea the quiet wife he threw away was the billionaire behind an empire. Her lesson? Silence is not weakness, and self-worth never needs permission. Support the channel with 1 like and 1 share. Thanks for watching.
Catherine Sterling's hand cracked across Isabella's cheek, the sound echoing in the massive marble foyer. You are a worthless piece of trash. After 8 years of living off my son's hard work, you dare ask for more? Ethan just stood there behind his mother, arms crossed, watching his wife stagger back from the slap, and he didn't do a single thing. Just sign the stupid papers, Isabella. $50,000 is more than a nobody like you deserves. He kicked the divorce documents across the floor, scattering them like trash. You brought nothing into this marriage. No money, no connections, no value at all. You're lucky I am even offering you this. Now, before we get to the moment Ethan finds out who he just insulted, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. And you'll want to stay for the end, because Isabella's revenge is truly unbelievable. Let me know what city you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing where you all are. Okay, let's get into part 1. The insults started long before any divorce papers. It began on a simple Tuesday night, 3 years into their marriage, when Catherine introduced Isabella as the help at a fancy charity event. Ethan just laughed, squeezing Isabella's hand hard enough to be a warning to stay quiet. She learned that night that saying anything just made it worse. Ethan, maybe we could talk about this in private? Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible in the kitchen. She looked down at the floor, a habit she'd learned after years of being careful. Discuss what? There's nothing to talk about. Just sign the papers. Ethan glanced at his phone, already bored. Jessica's waiting for me. Unlike you, she has real ambition. She's a marketing director. Catherine then stepped right up to Isabella, getting way too close. A marketing director, Isabella. Do you even know what that is? Her perfume was completely overpowering, and she did it on purpose. She'd once told Isabella that strong perfume was for important women who deserved to be noticed. My son could have married Caroline Whitmore. Do you know the Whitmores? Of course not. They're old money, with real class. But he chose you because you seemed so sweet and easy to control. Well, you've been controlled. Now it's time for you to leave. Isabella's hand tightened on the documents, wrinkling the thick paper. 8 years. 8 years of making dinners that got cold while Ethan was out networking. 8 years of enduring Catherine's parties, listening to wives talk about stocks while she was treated like a waitress. 8 years of ignoring the strange perfume on his shirts when he came home late. The apartment on 5th Street needs a lot of repairs, Isabella finally said, her voice shaking just a little. The building itself isn't safe. Ethan looked up from his phone, furious. Are you actually complaining right now? Any other woman would be thrilled with this offer. You came from nothing, Isabella. Absolutely nothing. That secondhand store where I found you was a total dive. I gave you all of this house, these clothes, a life you couldn't even imagine. And this is how you thank me. By questioning what I give you? I am not ungrateful. I'm just telling you a fact about the building. Then take it or leave it. Actually, scratch that. You don't have a choice. You will take it. Ethan turned to his mother with a smug grin. Can you believe her? 8 years, and she still has no clue how things work. Catherine patted his arm. You're too kind, sweetie. You always were. Remember when she tried to give you business advice on the Henderson merger? As if her little community college class taught her anything about high-level finance. She turned to Isabella, her voice dripping with fake pity. That was so cute. Like watching a little girl trying on her mommy's clothes. Isabella remembered that merger perfectly. She had told Ethan to look closer at the company's other assets, that their debt looked way too high. He'd just brushed her off and called her naive. The deal went through, and 6 months later, Ethan's company lost $3 million when that hidden debt was discovered. He never brought up her warning, and she never reminded him of it. "I need time to have a lawyer look at these," Isabella said, putting the papers on the counter. "A lawyer?" Ethan's laugh was a sharp, ugly sound that bounced off the high kitchen ceiling. "With what money? You going to use the house credit card? I'm canceling it tomorrow. You have nothing." "Isabella, you have no savings, no property, and no job. What lawyer is going to help you?" "I've already talked to the top divorce attorneys in the city. They know me, and they know you are a complete nobody." And it was true. Isabella had no money saved in her own name. All the bank accounts were controlled by Ethan, just as Catherine had demanded. A wife has no need for her own money. Catherine had announced loudly at their wedding for all the guests to hear. That's what causes trouble in a marriage. Women getting ideas they shouldn't have. "Even so, I want to speak with someone before I sign," Isabella insisted. Catherine moved towards her, her voice becoming cold and threatening. "Listen very carefully, because I will only say this one time. My son is being incredibly generous. You have no legal options, no money, and no powerful friends. If you fight him on this, I will make it my mission to see that every single door in this city is slammed in your face. I know powerful people, Isabella. Very powerful people. I can make it so you can't even rent a tiny apartment in the worst part of town. So you can sign and leave with a little something, or you can make this hard and leave with absolutely nothing. What's it going to be?" The threat was just hanging there in the air. Isabella looked at Catherine's face, so sure of herself, so sure of her power. Then she glanced at Ethan, who was already back on his phone, completely checked out. He'd been checked out of their marriage for years. Maybe he was never really in it to begin with. She had just been a useful accessory, someone to run his house while he climbed the ladder at Apex Solutions. "I'll sign," Isabella said softly. "But I want to meet somewhere neutral. Not here and not at your office, a place that's proper for signing legal papers." Ethan's eyebrows shot up. "You're making demands now? That's hilarious. Fine, whatever makes you feel powerful. Where do you want to go? The public library." "Helios International Headquarters, Conference Room 7. This Friday at 2 p.m. The name didn't register with Ethan at all. He just shrugged. Never heard of it, but okay. It's probably some shared office space for people pretending to have a business. Sounds perfect for you, actually. Mother, can you believe this? She's trying to act like she's in charge." Catherine let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, let her have her little fantasy, Ethan. It's likely the only time she'll ever step foot inside a real corporate office." "Friday at 2, then. Don't be late, Isabella. My son's time is very valuable, even if you think you are." Isabella just nodded and walked out of the kitchen. As she moved through the house, her house, even though her name wasn't on the deed, she touched the wall. She had picked the paint, managed the remodeling, and hosted the parties that helped Ethan's career. She was the secret engine that made his life work perfectly, while he got all the praise. She reached the guest room before she finally broke. It wasn't tears. She'd stopped crying about Ethan a long time ago. It was a single, deep, shaky breath. 8 years. It had been 8 years since she had told anyone who she really was. 8 years since she used her real bank accounts or went to a board meeting as herself. For 8 years, she played a part, hiding her true self because she honestly thought that love required sacrifice. Her phone vibrated. It was a text from Marcus Chen, her chief financial officer. "Board meeting tomorrow at 9. We need your input on the Apex situation." Isabella typed back fast. "I'll be there. And Marcus, Friday at 2 p.m. I need you to set something up for me. Anything you need. Conference Room 7. I want the full board there. And Marcus, it's time." The little dots showed he was typing, then stopped. Then finally, "I will make all the arrangements." Isabella put her phone down and went to the closet. Behind all the simple dresses Catherine approved of was a locked safe. She punched in the code and took out what was inside: her real passport, her corporate credit cards, her high-level security badges, and a pile of papers that revealed the truth about who Isabella Moretti actually was. Her phone rang. It was Daniel, her brother, the chief lawyer for Helios International. "Izzy Marcus just called me. Are you positive about this?" "I'm sure. Once this happens, you can't take it back. The news will go crazy. Your face will be on every screen. The privacy you've guarded for 8 years will just disappear." "I know." A moment of silence. "He really has no clue, does he?" "Ethan has no idea who you are." "None. Catherine did a background check before we married, but I hid everything behind shell companies and trusts. They found just what I wanted them to find: a nobody from a small town with nothing to her name." Daniel's voice turned serious. "I looked at the divorce papers he sent. Isabella, that prenuptial agreement he's talking about isn't valid. You never legally signed it because I had it changed. His copy is a fake." "I know, Daniel. I have always known. I just needed to see how far he would actually go. And now you know. Now I know for sure." Isabella pulled a black suit from the back of the closet, still in its designer garment bag. She hadn't worn proper business attire in 8 years. "Daniel, I need you to do something for me. Pull the files on Apex Solutions. Every transaction, every contract, every single deal they have made in the last 5 years." "Already done, Izzy. But there are some issues, serious issues. Ethan's been cooking the books. Not very well, mind you, but enough that federal regulators are starting to ask questions." Isabella closed her eyes. Even now, after everything, a tiny part of her had hoped Ethan was at least competent. How bad? "We're talking potential securities fraud. He has been inflating asset values to attract investors." "The Henderson merger you warned him about?" "He buried the losses through some creative accounting. It is all going to blow up probably in the next 6 months, maybe sooner if someone decides to look too closely. And if someone acquired Apex Solutions before that happened." Daniel went quiet for a moment. "Then that someone would own both the company and all its liabilities. But they would also have the power to clean house, install new management, and potentially restructure before the whole thing collapses." "Why are you asking?" "Because for 6 months, Ethan has been trying to pitch a merger with Helios. He has no idea that I am the one who's been blocking it." "Jesus, Izzy." "Schedule the acquisition. I want the paperwork ready by Friday. Make it a hostile takeover if you have to. And Daniel, I want the Sterling family estate researched. I need to know every debt, every liability, every single mortgage Catherine is carrying. I will have it for you by tomorrow morning." Isabella hung up and looked at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger. Thin, worn down, her hair styled the way Catherine preferred. Her clothes chosen for invisibility instead of impact. 8 years of erasing herself. 8 years of playing small. Never again. Downstairs she could hear Ethan on the phone, his voice carrying through the house. "Yeah," she signed. "Well, she will on Friday." "No, she did not put up a fight. I told you she would not. Jessica, baby, she is nothing. She never was. Come on, do not be jealous of a nobody. You are the only woman I want. The plaza in 20 minutes. I will be there." The front door slammed. Then there was silence. Catherine appeared in the doorway of the guest room without bothering to knock. "I trust you understand the situation now." Isabella turned slowly. "I understand perfectly." "Good. Then we can skip the theatrics on Friday. You will sign, you will take what my son is offering, and you will disappear from our lives. You were never suitable for this family anyway. I knew it from the moment Ethan brought you home, but he insisted he was in love." "Love." She said the word like it was something disgusting. "Love fades, Isabella. But class and breeding are forever. You cannot fake pedigree. You are right about that, Isabella agreed softly. You cannot fake pedigree. Catherine seemed satisfied by this response. I am glad you are finally accepting reality. Do not think too harshly of us, dear. You simply were not built for this life. It is not your fault you could not keep up. After Catherine left, Isabella sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a smile. It was not a happy smile. There was nothing happy about what she was about to do, but it was going to be satisfying. She picked up her phone again and scrolled through her contacts to a name she had not called in years. Victoria Chen, editor-in-chief of the city's most influential business publication. Victoria, it is Isabella Moretti. Yes, that Isabella Moretti. I need you to clear your schedule for Friday afternoon. I have a story for you, the biggest story of your career. Trust me on this. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Isabella moved through the Sterling house like a ghost, packing the few items that were actually hers. Ethan came home late each night, reeking of Jessica's perfume, and he did not even bother to hide it anymore. Catherine stopped by twice more, each time with some new cutting remark about Isabella's inadequacies. On Thursday night, Isabella had dinner alone at the massive dining room table where she had hosted countless parties for Ethan's colleagues. She had planned the menus, arranged the seating, charmed the wives, and guided the conversations that led to deals worth millions. And Ethan had introduced her every single time as just my wife. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Everything is ready. The board is assembled. Legal has the paperwork. PR has the press releases prepared. Izzy, are you absolutely certain about this? She typed back. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Friday morning arrived cold and clear. Isabella woke early, showered, and put on the black suit she had hidden for 8 years. It fit perfectly. She had maintained her weight, despite Catherine's suggestions that she was letting herself go. She applied makeup with a practiced hand, styled her hair into a sleek bun, and put on the diamond earrings her father had given her when she took over as CEO. They had been in the safe all this time, just waiting. She looked at herself in the mirror one final time. The woman looking back was not the meek housewife who had endured 8 years of humiliation. This was Isabella Moretti, the youngest female CEO in the Fortune 500. The woman who built Helios International into a multi-billion-dollar empire before she had even turned 30. The woman who was about to remind her husband exactly what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. At 1:30, Isabella's driver, her real driver, the one she had kept on payroll all these years, picked her up from a hotel downtown where she had spent the night. She had not told Ethan she was leaving the house. Let him think she was still there, still small, still manageable. The Helios International building was a steel and glass monument in the heart of the financial district, 70 stories of pure corporate power. Isabella's private elevator took her directly to the executive floor, where Marcus was waiting with a tablet and a grim expression. The board is ready. Daniel has the legal documents prepared. PR has a reporter standing by, and Isabella... Marcus hesitated. Ethan Sterling just entered the building. He is arguing with security because they will not let him pass the lobby without clearance. Isabella checked her watch. 1:50. Send someone down to escort him up. And Marcus, make sure he comes up the main elevator, the slow one. Let him see every floor on the way up, every name on every directory. I want him to understand exactly where he is. Marcus nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. As you wish, Ms. Moretti. Isabella walked into conference room 7. The entire board of Helios International was assembled, 12 of the most powerful executives in the industry, each one representing billions in assets and connections that spanned the globe. They stood when she entered, a show of respect that had become automatic over the years. Thank you all for being here, Isabella said, taking her seat at the head of the table. I apologize for the dramatic circumstances, but I assure you what is about to happen is necessary. David Wu, her chief operating officer, leaned forward. We have reviewed the Apex Solutions files you requested. Isabella, this is going to be brutal. Are you prepared for the fallout? I have been prepared for 8 years. The door opened. Ethan walked in, with Jessica on his arm. Both of them dressed like they were attending a casual lunch rather than a legal proceeding. Ethan's expression was confused. Then it turned to annoyed when he saw the assembled board members. "What is this?" he demanded. "I thought we were signing divorce papers, not attending some kind of corporate meeting." "Isabella, what is going on?" Isabella stood slowly, gathering the papers in front of her. "Hello, Ethan. Thank you for coming. Please have a seat. We have a lot to discuss." Jessica's laugh cut through the tension like broken glass. She clutched Ethan's arm tighter, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his expensive suit jacket. "Oh my God, Ethan. You did not tell me your ex-wife was this delusional. Look at her, sitting at the head of the table like she owns the place." Ethan's confusion was turning to irritation. He glanced around the conference room, finally taking in the assembled executives for the first time. "Isabella, what kind of game are you playing? Did you rent this room to make yourself feel important? Is this your pathetic attempt at having the upper hand?" Isabella remained seated, her hands folded calmly on the table in front of her. "Please sit down, Ethan." "You too, Jessica. We have quite a bit to discuss." "I am not sitting anywhere until you explain what's happening." Ethan's voice rose. "I agreed to meet you to finalize our divorce, not to attend some bizarre staged performance. Who are all these people? Did you hire actors?" Marcus Chen stepped forward, extending his hand to Ethan. Marcus Chen, Chief Financial Officer of Helios International. "I assure you, Mr. Sterling, we are quite real, and we have been very eager to meet you." Ethan ignored the outstretched hand. "Helios? International? I've been trying to get a meeting with your company for 6 months. My assistant has called your office dozens of times. You people will not even return my calls, and now suddenly you are all here for my wife's divorce proceeding. This does not make any sense." "Ex-wife," Jessica corrected, her voice sharp. "She is his ex-wife. Or she will be in about 5 minutes once she signs those papers and stops wasting everyone's time." David Wu, the chief operating officer, cleared his throat. "Actually, Miss Harrison, the papers Mr. Sterling brought are legally worthless. The prenuptial agreement he's talking about was never executed." Ethan S.'s face flushed with anger. "What are you talking about? Of course it was. I had my own lawyer draw it up before our wedding. Isabella signed it. I watched her do it myself." "You watched her sign a document," Daniel Moretti stated, rising from his chair at the end of the table. "But that document was never filed with the court. The copy you have is useless. And who in the hell are you?" Ethan demanded. "Daniel Moretti, Chief Legal Counsel for Helios International. I am also Isabella's brother." The room fell completely silent. Ethan's mouth hung open, but no sound came out. "Brother? Isabella, you told me you didn't have any family. You said you were all alone," I said. "My parents were dead," Isabella corrected him softly. "And they are. I never once said I didn't have a brother." Jessica's hand on Ethan's arm loosened just a bit. "Wait a minute. Your last name is Sterling, his is Moretti. That makes no sense." "I took Ethan's name when we got married," Isabella said. "It just seemed easier than explaining why I wanted to keep my own." "Ethan, please sit down. This will all go much more smoothly if you are seated." "Smoothly? Smoothly?" Ethan's voice cracked. "Nothing about this is smooth. You have lied to me for 8 years. You have a brother you never told me about, and he apparently works for the same company I've been trying to partner with for months. What else are you hiding from me?" Isabella's face remained a blank mask. "Quite a lot, actually. Sit down, and I will explain everything." Marcus pulled out a chair, motioning for Ethan to take a seat. After a tense moment, Ethan sat, pulling Jessica down into the chair next to him. His hands were trembling slightly, and he tried to hide it by gripping the armrests tightly. "Let's start with the basics," Isabella began. She picked up a folder from the table and slid it across to Ethan. "Do you know what Helios International does, Ethan?" "Of course I know. You re a massive conglomerate into technology, manufacturing, and real estate. You have holdings in 30 countries. Your annual revenue is somewhere around $40 billion. Ethan's confidence returned as he talked business. This was his world, which is exactly why I've been trying to secure this partnership. Apex Solutions would be perfect for your portfolio. We specialize in software integration and data analytics. Isabella finished for him. I know exactly what Apex Solutions does. I've read every single business plan you've submitted, every financial projection, every market analysis. I have reviewed all of them personally." Ethan blinked. "You've reviewed them? Why would you have access to my business proposals?" "Open the folder, Ethan." He slowly opened it. The first page was a corporate organization chart. Right at the top, in bold letters, was Isabella Moretti, Chief Executive Officer, Helios International. All the color drained from Ethan S.'s face. "This is a joke. This has to be some kind of joke." "It's not a joke," Marcus said flatly. "Isabella founded Helios International 9 years ago, 6 months before she ever met you. She built this company from nothing. She has been the chief executive officer since day one." Jessica snatched the folder, her eyes scanning the pages frantically. No, this is crazy. Ethan, she was a salesgirl at a thrift shop when you met her. She told you she barely even finished community college. She didn't even own a car. "I worked at that thrift shop 1 day a week," Isabella explained. "It was a charity shop that my foundation funds. I volunteered because I liked connecting with people in the community, and I didn't have a car because I preferred to be driven. My driver was waiting for me outside the whole time." Ethan jumped to his feet so fast his chair crashed backward. "You're lying. This is some kind of elaborate con. You are not a CEO. You are not a billionaire. I would have known. I would have found out about it. How?" Isabella's voice was perfectly calm. "Your mother ran a background check on me with a private investigator who I paid very well to give her exactly the information I wanted him to find. You never questioned it because it confirmed what you already wanted to believe, that I was beneath you, that I needed you, and that you were doing me a huge favor by marrying me." Catherine, the name, was unspoken, but everyone in the room felt its weight. Ethan's hands curled into tight fists. "My mother knew who you were. She knew all this, and she didn't tell me. Your mother knew what I allowed her to know. She found a woman named Isabella Moretti who worked retail, went to community college, and had no visible assets, and that was all true. She just didn't look deep enough to find the shell companies, the offshore trusts, or the layers of corporate structure I built to protect my privacy. And why would she? She found exactly what she was looking for. Proof that I was worthless." Jessica stood up, her voice shrill. "This is insane, Ethan. She's obviously lying. Just look at her. Does she look like a billionaire CEO? She dresses like a librarian. She spent 8 years cooking your meals and planning your pathetic dinner parties." "I spent 8 years," Isabella said, her voice turning to ice for the first time, "trying to be a good wife to a man who treated me like some kind of accessory. I cooked those meals because I wanted to take care of my husband. I planned those parties because they were good for his career. I stayed silent while your mother insulted me because I thought my marriage required sacrifice. I gave up my public life, my place in my own company, my entire identity, because I foolishly thought that love was supposed to come first." She stood up, and something about her posture shifted. It was subtle, but it was there. The way she held her shoulders, the firm set of her jaw, the direct way she met his gaze. This was not the timid housewife who'd been pushed around the Sterling mansion for 8 years. This was someone completely different. But I never gave up Helios, Isabella continued. I ran it from home. I attended board meetings on video calls while you thought I was at a yoga class. I negotiated billion-dollar contracts while you were at the office, bragging to your friends about how well I knew my place. I built an empire while you built nothing but debt and a mountain of lies. Lies. Ethan's voice cracked again. I am not the one who's been lying all this time. You lied about absolutely everything. Who you were, where you came from, what you were capable of doing. I never lied, Isabella snapped back. I just didn't volunteer information you never bothered to ask for. You never asked about my education, Ethan. You just assumed I went to community college because it fit your little story. I have a doctorate in economics from Stanford. You never asked about my family background. My father was Roberto Moretti. Maybe you've heard of him. That name hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Everyone in the business world knew Roberto Moretti. He was a legend, an industrial titan, before his death 5 years ago. His company spanned the globe. His influence reached into every corner of international finance. Roberto Moretti's daughter, Ethan whispered. You're Roberto Moretti's daughter, and you let me. We lived in my house. I told you what to wear. You did, Isabella agreed, and I let you because I wanted to see if you could love me for who you thought I was, not for my name or my money. I wanted to know if you were any different from every other man who chased me because of my father's fortune. It turns out you were exactly the same. No, actually, you were worse because at least they wanted something from me. You just wanted someone to look down on. Daniel stood up, walking over to stand by his sister. For 8 years, I watched you tear her down. Every family dinner where your mother made fun of her education. Every business meeting where you laughed at her ideas. Every single time you came home late smelling like another woman and expected her to just smile and pretend she didn't know. I wanted to destroy you back then, Ethan. But she wouldn't let me. Why? Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. Why would you do all this? Why would you hide everything? Because I loved you, Isabella said simply. I met you at that little thrift shop, and you seemed different. You talked about building something real. You said you wanted a partner, not some trophy wife. You said all the right things, Ethan, and I actually believed you. I thought if I told you the truth too soon, you'd never see me. You'd only see dollar signs and connections and a way to get ahead. I just wanted to be loved for myself first. She paused, and for the first time, her voice trembled just a little. And by the time I realized what a mistake I'd made, by the time I saw you would never love me, no matter what I was, I had already invested so much time in pretending. I just kept thinking, maybe if I try a little harder, maybe if I'm more supportive, maybe if I just make myself smaller and quieter and easier to manage, you'd finally see me. But you never did, Ethan. You never even looked. Marcus stepped forward with another, much thicker folder. Mr. Sterling, we need to discuss Apex Solutions. Ethan's head snapped toward the chief financial officer. What about Apex? Your company is bankrupt. It has been for about 18 months. You've been using creative accounting to hide losses of approximately $12 million. The Henderson merger your wife warned you against. You buried those losses through fraudulent financial reporting. The Securities and Exchange Commission is currently investigating you, though they haven't gone public with it yet. The blood completely drained from Ethan's face. How do you know that? Because Helios International has been conducting its due diligence on your company for the last 6 months. You were trying to partner with us, remember? We look into every potential partner very closely. Very closely. Marcus flipped open the folder, revealing stack after stack of financial documents. You have been inflating your asset values, hiding your liabilities, and making promises to investors that you could never possibly keep. It's securities fraud, Mr. Sterling. You're looking at federal prison time." Jessica yanked her arm away from Ethan as if she'd been burned. "Federal charges, Ethan. What on earth is he talking about?" "He's lying," Ethan said, but his voice was weak. "He's making this up to what?" Isabella asked. "To hurt you, Ethan. I don't need to make anything up. You did this to yourself. I watched you do it. I tried to warn you about Henderson. You called me naive. I tried to suggest better ways to handle the books. You told me to just stick to planning dinner parties. I tried to help you over and over again. And you ignored every single word I said because you couldn't imagine your uneducated, worthless wife might know more about business than you." David Wu pulled out another folder. "We also have proof of your gambling debts, $750,000, owed to different casinos and people. You've been using company money to pay some of them off, which is embezzlement." "And the family estate," Daniel added, holding up his own documents. "Your mother took out a mortgage 3 years ago for one of your failed projects. She's currently 6 months behind on the payments. The bank is about to start foreclosure." Ethan just sank back into his chair, his face pale. "No, that estate has been in our family for generations. My mother would never risk it." "Your mother risked everything for you," Isabella said softly. "She believed in you so much that she bet the family legacy on you. And you failed her, Ethan. Just like you failed me. Just like you failed every single person who ever trusted you." Jessica was slowly backing toward the door. "I need to go. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. Ethan, I'll call you later." "Sit down, Miss Harrison," Marcus said firmly. "We're not quite done. I don't work for you. You can't order me around." "Actually," Isabella said, "you work for Thornton Marketing, right? The agency that handles advertising for Apex Solutions." Jessica froze. "Yes, so what?" "Thornton Marketing is owned by a parent company called Meridian Holdings. Meridian Holdings is part of Helios International, which means, technically, you do work for me. And I have some questions about the invoices your department submitted. Specifically, the ones for work that was never actually done, the ones you and Ethan used to funnel money out of Apex Solutions and into offshore accounts." Jessica's face went completely white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." Isabella's voice was like ice. "Sit down, Miss Harrison. Now." Jessica sat. Ethan's hands were shaking uncontrollably now. "What do you want, money? Is that what this is about? I'll find a way to pay you, the divorce settlement, keep it all. The house, the cars, everything. Just don't press charges. I don't want your house, Ethan. I own 17 properties all over the world. I don't want your cars. I have a garage full of cars I've never even driven. I don't want your money because you don't have any. You're broke. You've been broke for over a year, just living on credit and borrowed time." "Then what? What do you want?" Isabella picked up one last folder. This one was thin and elegant. "I want Apex Solutions." "I'm buying your company, Ethan." "Well, actually, I'm taking it over. Since you are in no position to negotiate, the paperwork is all ready. The board has already approved it. The deal is final at 5 p.m. today." "You can't do that. The shareholders have already been told. Most of them are thrilled to have a way out before the SEC investment becomes public. The ones who weren't so thrilled became much more agreeable when we explained the alternative was watching their investment become worthless when you're arrested." Ethan stood up again, his chair scraping loudly on the floor. "You're doing this just to punish me. You're ruining my life because I wanted a divorce." "No," Isabella said, her voice colder than anyone in the room had ever heard. "I'm doing this because you destroyed 8 years of my life, because you made me feel worthless and small and stupid, because you let your mother abuse me and you joined right in, because you cheated on me with this woman and dozens of others before her. And you never once felt bad about it, because you took everything I gave you, my time, my support, my love, my business advice that could have saved this company, and you threw it back in my face like it was garbage." She walked around the table slowly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. When she reached Ethan, she stopped and looked him directly in the eye. "You wanted to give me $50,000 and a rundown apartment and call that generous. Let me tell you what I'm giving you, Ethan. I'm giving you nothing. Your company is mine. Your house will be foreclosed on this month because I bought the mortgage, and I'm demanding payment. Your mother's estate is being taken by the bank that I now own. Your reputation is about to be ruined when the SEC investigation goes public, which will happen the second I make one phone call. And Jessica, she's being fired from Thornton Marketing, effective immediately. We'll be filing fraud charges against her by Monday." Jessica made a choking sound. Ethan just stared, his face completely blank from the shock. "This is what happens," Isabella continued, her voice steady but filling the entire room. "When you underestimate people, when you assume that being quiet means being weak, when you mistake kindness for stupidity, when you believe someone's value is based on how much noise they make or how much space they take up. You had 8 years with a woman who would have given you the world, who would have helped you build an empire, who would have stood by you through anything. And you threw it all away because you needed to feel superior to someone." She stepped back, taking her place at the head of the table. "The divorce papers you brought are worthless. My lawyers have prepared new ones that reflect the real situation. You'll get nothing in the settlement because there's nothing left to divide. By law, you came into this marriage with Apex Solutions, and you will leave with what it's worth now, which is about -$8 million in debt." Daniel placed a new stack of papers in front of Ethan. "Sign these, and you can walk away a free man. Don't sign them, and we move forward with both the divorce and the criminal charges. It's your choice." Ethan picked up the papers with trembling hands. He read the first page, then the second, then desperately flipped through the rest. "This says I agree not to fight the acquisition. It says I admit the company is bankrupt. It says I give up all rights to any marital assets." "Isabella, please, please. There has to be another way. There isn't. I'll change, I'll be better. We can start over. I'll treat you like you deserve. You'll sign the papers, Ethan, because it's the only choice you have left." His hand hovered over the signature line. "After everything we've been through, 8 years of marriage, and this is how it ends." Isabella's face softened just a little, but her voice stayed firm. "This is how it ends because of how you chose to end it. You filed for divorce, remember? You humiliated me in front of your mother. You threw money at me like I was some prostitute you were paying off. You brought your mistress to our divorce meeting. You made your choices, Ethan. Now you have to live with them." Ethan's pen scratched across the signature line, the sound echoing in the silent room. His hand trembled so badly the signature was barely readable. Nothing like his usual bold, confident writing. When he was done, he dropped the pen as if it had burned his hand. "There. Are you happy now? You've destroyed everything I've worked for, everything my family built." Isabella gathered the papers without even looking at him. "Your family built nothing. Your grandfather built something. Your father kept it going. You threw it all away. Don't you dare blame me for your failures." Jessica suddenly stood up, her chair scraping backwards. "I'm leaving. I don't have to sit here and watch this." "Actually, you do." Marcus moved to block the door. "We still need to discuss the criminal charges you're facing, Miss Harrison." "Criminal charges? I haven't done anything wrong." David Wu opened another folder, spreading documents on the table. "These are invoices from Thornton Marketing to Apex Solutions. 27 separate bills over the last 14 months for a total of $2.3 million. The services listed are market research, brand development, and consulting. Would you like to explain which of these services you actually provided?" Jessica's mouth opened and closed. "All of them." We provided all of those services. Really? Because we've talked to your coworkers at Thornton. They have no record of any work being done for Apex Solutions. No project files, no meeting notes, no results, nothing. Just invoices that you approved and Ethan Sterling paid to offshore accounts you both can access. That's not true. Ethan, tell them it's not true. Ethan didn't say a word. He just stared at the table, his face ashen, his breathing shallow. Ethan, Jessica's voice became a shriek. Tell them we were working together. Tell them this was a legitimate business. He can't, Isabella said quietly, because it wasn't. You two were running a fraud scheme for over a year. Small amounts at first, and then bigger ones as you got braver. You thought you were so clever, using a marketing firm to hide the money trail. You weren't. My accountants found everything in less than 1 week. Jessica turned on Isabella, her face twisted with rage. You self-righteous. You think you're so much better than everyone else. You hid who you were for 8 years. You're a liar and a fraud, just like us. No, Isabella said, her voice calm. I am nothing like you. I hid my identity to protect myself, and to see if Ethan could love me for me. You hid your crimes to steal money. There's a big difference. You manipulated him. You let him think you were nobody so you could hold it over him. I let him show me who he really was. And he showed me very clearly. Isabella turned to Marcus. Have the police been called? They're on their way. They should be here within the hour. Jessica's face went from flushed red to ghostly white. Police? You're having us arrested? Not us. Just you. Ethan signed a cooperation agreement during the divorce settlement. He has agreed to testify against you in exchange for lesser charges. You, on the other hand, have no such deal. Jessica whirled to face Ethan, her hands balling into fists. You bastard. You absolute bastard. You told me we were in this together. You swore you would protect me. Ethan finally looked up, his eyes empty. I cannot protect you. I cannot even protect myself. We had plans. We were going to run away together after the divorce was final. You promised me. Jessica's voice cracked on the last word, tears ruining her perfectly applied makeup. You said you loved me. I lied. Ethan's voice was flat, without any emotion. I told you what you wanted to hear so you would help me hide the money. That is all it ever was. The noise Jessica made was somewhere between a shriek and a sob. She lunged at Ethan, her nails aimed for his face. But Marcus grabbed her arm before she made contact. Miss Harrison, I highly recommend you calm down. Calm down? Calm down. He used me. He lied to me. And now I am going to prison while he walks away free. He is not walking free, Daniel corrected her. He is still facing criminal charges, just not as many. And he will be bankrupt, homeless, and no one will ever hire him again. Prison might actually be a better option. Ethan flinched at those words but didn't protest. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in the last hour. His shoulders slumped, his gaze distant. Isabella watched him for a long moment, a complicated look on her face. It was not quite pity and not quite satisfaction. It was something in between that neither of them could define. You still do not get it, do you? Ethan's head lifted slowly. Get what? That you are more powerful than me? That you won? I get that perfectly. No, you do not understand that none of this ever had to happen. If you had been honest with me, if you had treated me like a partner instead of a possession, if you had just listened when I tried to help you, we could have built something amazing together. Helios and Apex could have merged legally. You could have been part of something bigger than just yourself. Instead, you chose to tear me down just to make yourself feel powerful. I did not know who you were. That is precisely my point. Isabella's voice finally rose, the first crack in her calm demeanor. You did not know who I was, and you treated me like dirt anyway. If I had told you on day one that I was a billionaire, you would have treated me differently. But not because you respected me as a human being. You would have treated me differently because you respected my money. I wanted to be loved for myself, Ethan. Just for myself. And you could not even do that when you thought I was a nobody. The words just hung in the air between them. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. I did love you in the beginning. When we first met, I really did. No, you did not. You loved the idea of me. You loved having someone who looked up to you, someone who made you feel successful and important. The second I stopped serving that purpose, the second I had opinions or needs of my own, you turned against me. That is not love. That is ownership. A knock at the door interrupted them. A woman in a sharp business suit entered, her expression professionally blank. Ms. Moretti, Victoria Chen, from Business Chronicle. You said I should be here at 3. Isabella glanced at her watch. 3 o'clock on the dot. Perfect. Victoria, please come on in. Ethan's head snapped up. Business Chronicle? Isabella, what is going on here? I am holding a press conference, Isabella said plainly. Victoria is going to break the story of Helios International buying Apex Solutions. She is also going to reveal my true identity as CEO and the details of our divorce. No, absolutely not. You cannot do that. The shame. My mother. Everyone will know. Everyone will know the truth, Isabella corrected him. That you married a woman you thought was worthless and never and treated her that way, never caring enough to find out who she really was. That you ran your company into the ground with your incompetence and fraud. That you betrayed your wife, your investors, and all your employees. Yes, Ethan, everyone is going to know. Victoria was already setting up a small recording device, her fingers flying across her tablet. Miss Moretti, I have some questions prepared, but I would love to hear your side of the marriage. How did you maintain your cover for 8 years? I did not maintain a cover. I just lived a quiet life. I worked from my home office, took meetings remotely, and let Ethan believe whatever he wanted to believe about me. People tend to see what they expect to see. Ethan expected a simple housewife, so that is all he ever saw, even when the proof of something more was staring him in the face. What proof? Ethan demanded. You never gave me any reason to think you were anything else. I have a PhD, Ethan. I corrected your financial reports on several occasions. I speak 4 languages fluently. I read the Financial Times every single morning at breakfast while you read the sports page. I gave you advice on the Henderson deal that would have saved your company millions. I knew things about international trade law that most lawyers do not even know. The proof was everywhere. You just refused to look. Victoria's eyes were practically gleaming at the scent of this massive story. And your mother-in-law, Catherine Sterling, how did she treat you? Isabella paused for just a second, and Ethan saw an opening. Do not, Isabella, please, do not. My mother does not deserve to be humiliated in public. Whatever you think about me, she was just trying to protect me. Protect you? Isabella's voice dropped to a dangerous level. Your mother spent 8 years telling me I was worthless. She would inspect my closet to make sure I was not dressing too nicely. She criticized every meal I cooked, every word I said, every single breath I took. She called me stupid to my face at family dinners. She told all your friends I was a gold digger, even though I never touched a cent of your money besides what you gave me for groceries. She slapped me, Ethan, more than once, and you just stood there and you watched. The room went dead silent. Even Victoria stopped typing, her face a mask of shock. She what? Daniel's voice was dangerously quiet. Your mother hit you? Marcus took a step forward, his face dark. Isabella, why did you not tell us? Because I thought I could deal with it. Because I thought if I just tried a little harder, if I was more patient, that things would eventually get better. Because I was ashamed. Isabella's voice finally cracked on the last word. It was the first real emotion she had shown since the meeting started. I was ashamed that I let it happen, that I stayed, that I kept trying to earn the approval of people who would never respect me, no matter what I did. Ethan's face had gone from a pale gray to a sickly green. I did not know she hit you. I swear I did not know. You knew." Isabella's eyes burned into his. "You saw the bruise on my arm after that charity event. I told you I ran into a door and you never questioned it, because that would have meant confronting your mother. You saw her grab my wrist so hard it left marks. You heard the names she called me. You stood by and let it all happen because it was easier than standing up to her." "Ms. Moretti," Victoria said softly, "are you saying you experienced physical abuse during your marriage?" "I am saying," Isabella replied, choosing her words very carefully, "that I was treated as less than human by my husband and his entire family. Whether that abuse was physical, emotional, or psychological, it was still abuse. And I stayed because I was taught that marriage is supposed to be hard work. I believed that love meant sacrifice. I believed that if I just loved him enough, he would eventually love me back." She turned back to Ethan, tears finally welling in her eyes, though her voice stayed strong. "But you cannot make someone love you, Ethan. I learned that far too late. You can give them your everything, your time, your energy, your very identity, your self-respect, and it will not matter if they have already decided you are not worth loving." Victoria was typing furiously now, her expression locked in. "This is going to be huge. The business world is going to explode when this news breaks." "I know," Isabella said. "That is exactly why I am doing this. Because there are millions of women out there right now being told that they are not enough, not smart enough, not valuable enough, not worthy. They are being belittled and dismissed and broken by the very people who claim to love them. And I want them all to know that the person telling them they are worthless is wrong. That they have incredible power even when they feel powerless. That being quiet does not mean you are weak." Daniel moved to stand by his sister, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Isabella, we can still call this off. We can make the takeover private. We can keep your name out of all the papers. You do not have to expose your private life like this." "Yes, I do. Because if I do not, it means he wins. It means 8 years of being abused and humiliated were all for nothing. It means the next woman he marries will suffer through the same thing, and the next, and the one after that. This all stops right now." Ethan was just shaking his head, his hands pressed to his temples. "You think this will destroy your mother? She's 67 years old, with health problems, and the stress might kill her. Well, maybe she should have thought of that before spending 8 years trying to destroy me. She's my mother, you say, and I was your wife." Isabella's voice finally cracked, raw emotion flooding out. "I stood beside you for 8 years. I backed every single dream you ever had. I gave up my public life, my role in my own company, my entire identity, all because you asked me to. I let your mother abuse me because you asked me to. I made myself invisible because that's what you needed, and the second you decided I wasn't useful anymore, you threw me out like trash." The tears were streaming down her face now, and she didn't even try to wipe them away. "You threw me away, Ethan. As if I meant nothing. As if 8 years of my life meant nothing. You handed me divorce papers and 50,000 and told me to be grateful. So don't you dare talk to me about your mother's health. Don't talk to me about being humiliated. You humiliated me first. This is just the consequence." Ethan swayed on his feet. "I'm sorry, Isabella. I am so sorry. I didn't get it. I didn't know. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. There is a very big difference." She turned away from him and faced Victoria instead. "I'll answer every one of your questions. I want the whole story published. No details left out, nothing softened. The truth, exactly as it happened." Wait, a new voice cut in from the doorway. Everyone turned. Catherine Sterling was standing there. Her face was pale, but she held herself rigidly. "I need to speak with my daughter-in-law." Alone. Marcus moved to block her path. "Mrs. Sterling, this is a private meeting." "Let her in," Isabella said, her voice quiet. "We might as well see this through to the end." Catherine walked into the room, head held high, but her hands were shaking. Up close, she looked much older than her 67 years. The perfect mask she always wore was cracking under the pressure. Isabella, I need you to understand something. I understand everything I need to, Catherine. No, you don't. The older woman's voice was sharp, but there was a desperate edge to it. You don't know what it's like to watch everything you've built just fall apart, to see your family's name dragged through the mud, to know that everything your parents and your grandparents worked for is about to vanish into thin air. You're right, I don't understand that, because when my father died and left me Helios International, I didn't run it into the ground. I built it into something bigger. I honored his legacy. I didn't waste it. Catherine's composure slipped a little. You had resources I never had. You had an education, connections. I had the exact same resources your son had. Better, actually. And yet, he failed where I succeeded. Why do you think that is, Catherine? Because you're ruthless. Because you'll do whatever it takes and destroy whoever you need to. Because I'm competent. Isabella cut in. Because I work hard. Because I listen to people who know more than I do. And because I don't let my pride get in the way of my judgment. All things your son never learned. Because you spent his whole life telling him he was special, just for being born. Catherine's face flushed a deep red. How dare you? How dare I? You spent 8 years telling me I was worthless. You inspected my clothes like I was a servant. You policed what I ate so I wouldn't get fat. You told me I was stupid, useless, and beneath your family. You hit me, Catherine, multiple times. And now you have the nerve to stand here and demand my sympathy? I was protecting my son. From what? From having a partner who was competent. From having someone who could have actually helped him succeed. You weren't protecting him, Catherine. You were protecting your own ego. You couldn't handle the idea that your son might marry someone who didn't worship you. So, you tried to break me, and when that didn't work, you helped him throw me away. Catherine's hands were shaking uncontrollably now. If you do this, if you tell this story to the press, it will kill me. The shame, the humiliation, I will not survive it. Then, I suppose we'll both know what that feels like. Please. The word was barely a whisper. Catherine Sterling, the woman who had terrorized Isabella for 8 long years, was now begging. Please, Isabella. I am asking you, as a woman who made terrible mistakes, please don't do this. Isabella watched her for a long moment. Did you ever once ask me how I felt? When you criticized everything I did, when you told me I wasn't good enough, when you slapped me for speaking up at a dinner party. Did you ever stop to think what that did to me? Did you ever see me as a human being with feelings? Catherine said nothing. That's what I thought. Isabella turned back to Victoria. Mrs. Sterling being here changes nothing. Publish the story exactly as we discussed. No! Catherine's voice rose to a shriek. I'll sue you. I will file for defamation. You'll do nothing, Daniel said, his voice cold, because every word of it is true, and we have the documents to prove it all. We have text messages where you call Isabella names, emails where you tear her down to your friends, and statements from staff who saw you hit her. If you try to sue, we will bury you in legal discovery. Catherine spun toward her son, desperate. Ethan, stop her. Don't just stand there like an idiot. Do something. Ethan looked at his mother, his eyes empty. What do you want me to do, Mother? She owns everything now. She has all the power. We don't have anything. It's over. Over? Over? Catherine's voice climbed with hysteria. Your grandfather built this family from nothing. Your father kept it going through 2 recessions. I have sacrificed everything for you, and you're just going to let some nobody destroy it all? She's not a nobody, Ethan suddenly screamed, making everyone in the room jump. That's the entire problem. She was never a nobody. She was always better than us, and we were too stupid and too arrogant to see it. That confession seemed to steal the last of his energy. He fell back into his chair and buried his head in his hands. Oh God, what have I done? What have we done? Catherine stared at her son, her face shifting from shock to rage, and then finally, to fear. She turned to Isabella one final time. What is it you want?
Money?
I can get you money. I can sell my jewelry, the artwork. I don't want your money. I don't want a single thing from you. I want you to finally understand what you did to me. I want you to feel just a tiny piece of the pain you caused me. And I want the world to know the truth about who you really are. Isabella's voice was steady again, cold as ice and final. That is all I want, Catherine. For everyone to see you without your mask. Victoria cleared her throat. If we want to make the evening news broadcast, I need to start writing. Miss Moretti, are you ready to go on record? I am. Then let's start with the basics. When did you realize your husband had no idea who you truly were? Isabella smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. The third time he tried to explain my own business strategy to me, incorrectly. I had published a paper on it when I was at Stanford. He had read a short article summarizing my work and was explaining it to me like I was a child. That's when I knew. He had never really seen me at all. Victoria's fingers flew across her tablet, capturing every single word. And you never corrected him? You never told him he was wrong? I tried once. He just laughed and told me I didn't understand complex business ideas. He actually patted my head like I was a little dog. Isabella's voice was even, but her hands were clenched into tight fists in her lap. After that, I just stopped trying. I realized he didn't want a partner. He wanted an audience. Catherine made a choking sound. You're twisting. Everything. You are making us out to be monsters. I'm just telling the truth. If the truth makes you sound like a monster, then maybe you should think about your own actions. Isabella turned back to Victoria. The worst part wasn't how he dismissed me. It was watching him fail, again and again, while refusing to listen to anyone who could actually help him. I had connections to investors who could have easily saved Apex Solutions. I had industry knowledge that could have prevented his biggest disasters, but he never asked. Not one time in 8 years did he ask for my advice and actually listen to my answer. Because you were a housewife. Ethan's head shot up, his face beet red. You spent your days cooking and cleaning. How was I supposed to know you had an economics PhD? Or that you ran a billion-dollar company? You could have asked about my life before we met. You could have glanced at my bookshelves and noticed the advanced economics textbooks. You could have paid attention when I used technical terms correctly. You could have wondered why I am fluent in Mandarin, Japanese, German, and Portuguese. But you didn't ask, because you didn't care. My past didn't matter to you because I didn't matter to you. Victoria looked up from her tablet. You speak 5 languages? 6, actually. I learned Russian during my first year as CEO. International business requires communication. Isabella's voice had a clear hint of pride. I negotiated our Moscow expansion myself, which saved the company $40 million in translation and consulting fees. Marcus nodded. She also personally handled the Tokyo merger, the Berlin acquisition, and the Sao Paulo partnership. Her language skills alone have saved Helios hundreds of millions over the years. Ethan was just staring at Isabella, as if he was seeing a complete stranger. You were negotiating international deals while we were married? How? When? While you were at the office bragging about your average quarterly numbers. I was on conference calls with executives across 12 different time zones. While you were at business dinners with Jessica, I was closing contracts worth more than your entire company. While you were sleeping, I was working. I never stopped working, Ethan. I just stopped telling you about it. The house was always clean, and dinner was always ready. You were always. He stopped, realization hitting him. The staff? You had staff? Of course I had staff. A housekeeper came 3 times a week. A chef prepared our meals in advance that I just had to reheat. A remote personal assistant handled all of my scheduling, But I made sure they only came when you were at work. I made sure there was no sign of them, because you needed to think that I did everything by myself. You had to believe I spent my whole day serving you." Catherine's face went from beet red to a shade of purple. "You lied to him. You deliberately created a false reality. I let him believe what he chose to believe. That's different. He never asked me if I had help. He never wondered how a woman supposedly doing all the housework still had time to read 3 newspapers a day, stay in perfect shape, and somehow never look tired or stressed. He didn't ask because his ego needed to believe I spent every waking moment focused on him. Victoria was practically buzzing with excitement. "This is amazing. Miss Moretti, can you give me some specific examples of business advice he just ignored?" "The Henderson merger. I told him their debt-to-asset ratio was a major red flag and their subsidiaries needed a much closer look. He brushed me off and lost $3 million. The Rothman investment. I warned him that Rothman had a clear history of defaulting on his loans. He called me paranoid. Rothman defaulted 6 months later, costing Apex another $2 million. The Singapore expansion. I told him his market research was completely flawed and Singapore's regulations would cause huge problems. He ignored me, pushed ahead anyway, and had to pull out within a year, losing $4 million. She paused, letting those numbers hang in the air. Between just those 3 major decisions I warned him about, Ethan lost $9 million because he couldn't accept his housewife might know more than him. And those are just the big losses. There were dozens of smaller bad calls I tried to prevent. Ethan's face had gone from a sickly green to gray. $9 million. Oh my God, $9 million because I was too arrogant to listen. The company would still be profitable if you had listened to her even one time, Marcus added. We ran the numbers. Any one of those 3 decisions made correctly would have kept Apex Solutions afloat. All 3, and you would be competing with major corporations right now instead of filing for bankruptcy. Daniel pulled out another folder, this one thicker than all the others combined. Speaking of bankruptcy, we should discuss full extent of the Sterling family's financial situation. Mrs. Sterling, you might want to take a seat for this. Catherine stayed on her feet, arms crossed over her chest. I know our financial situation. I do not need you to explain it to me. I do not think you do. Not the complete picture. Daniel opened the folder, spreading documents on the table. The family estate was mortgaged 3 years ago for $2.7 million to fund Ethan's failed Singapore expansion. Its current value is $1.8 million. You're underwater by $900,000. The market will bounce back. Real estate always recovers. Not in that area. We had the property assessed. It has foundation issues, outdated electrical, and plumbing that hasn't been touched since 1960. You're looking at a minimum of $1.2 million in repairs just to meet code. Add that to the $900,000 you are underwater, and you are at a $2.1 million deficit on a property the bank is getting ready to foreclose on. Catherine's knees gave a little. She grabbed the back of a chair to keep her balance. That is not possible. We have been making our payments. You have been making minimum payments on a balloon mortgage. The balloon payment of $600,000 is due in 90 days. Where exactly are you planning to get $600,000, Mrs. Sterling? Silence. Catherine's mouth opened and closed, but not a single sound came out. That is what I thought. Daniel moved on to the next set of papers. Your investment portfolio, currently worth about $400,000. 3 years ago, it was worth $1.2 million. What happened? The market. The market is up 17% over the last 3 years. Your portfolio is down 66%. That is not the market, Mrs. Sterling. Those are catastrophically bad investment choices. Let me guess, you took financial advice from your son. Catherine's silence said it all, and then, We have the credit cards. Daniel laid out another stack of statements. 17 different cards, all maxed out or close to it, for a total debt of $340,000. Your minimum payments alone are costing you $7,000 a month. How are you paying for that? I am managing. Catherine's voice was just a whisper. No, you are not managing. You are drowning. You have been taking cash advances from one card to make minimum payments on others. That is not management. That is a desperate shell game. Daniel's tone was not cruel, just relentless. Mrs. Sterling, you are personally in debt for roughly $3.2 million. Your only major asset is a house that is worth less than what you owe. Your income is a $2,000 a month Social Security check. The math simply does not work. It's not even close to working. Catherine finally slumped into a chair, her face pale. What are you saying? I'm saying you're filing for bankruptcy within 6 months, like it or not. The only question is whether you do it now with some dignity, or you wait for the foreclosure and lawsuits and do it after you've been publicly shamed. This is your fault, Catherine whispered, staring at Isabella. You did this to us. No, Isabella said, her voice firm. You did this to yourselves. You mortgaged your home for Ethan's business ideas without checking a single detail. You maxed out your credit cards to live a life you couldn't afford. You made awful investments because you were too proud to hire a financial advisor. I did not make a single one of those choices. You did. Victoria was still typing away, her face a mix of shock and professional delight. Mrs. Sterling, did you ever physically assault Isabella during the marriage? Catherine's head snapped up. That is none of your concern. It is absolutely my concern. I am writing a story about domestic abuse and power. Did you hit her? I may have had to discipline her when she got out of line. That is not the same as assault. Disciplined her? Victoria's voice went up an octave. She was your daughter-in-law, not your child. You had no right to discipline her. She was living in my son's house, eating his food, spending his money. I had every right to make sure she understood her place. Isabella let out a sharp, bitter laugh. And there we have it. The truth finally spills out. This was never about protecting Ethan. It was always about power. You had to control me because the alternative was admitting your son married a woman you could not bully. You should have been grateful we lifted you up from nothing. I was never nothing, Catherine. That is the whole point. I was always something. I was always someone. You just refused to see it because admitting I had value would somehow take away from yours. Isabella stood up, walking slowly towards the older woman. You want to know what is truly ironic? I would have helped you. If you had treated me like a member of the family, with just basic human decency, I would have gladly used my resources to support you all. I could have saved the estate, paid off all your debts, and helped Ethan build Apex into a real company. But you could never allow that, because it would have meant you had to admit that you needed me. Catherine was just shaking her head over and over, tears now streaming down her face. No, I do not believe any of this. You are making it all up. You're some kind of con artist who has tricked everyone. Mrs. Sterling. Marcus's voice cut through her denial. I have known Isabella Moretti for 12 years. I was the 7th employee at Helios International. I have watched her build this company from a tiny office with 3 people into a global powerhouse with over 50,000 employees. She is not a con artist. She is one of the most brilliant business minds of this generation, and you treated her like she was garbage because you were too insecure to see the truth right in front of your face. A knock at the door cut them off. A security guard peeked in, looking uncomfortable. Ms. Moretti, there are 2 police officers here asking for a Jessica Harrison. Jessica, who had been sitting quietly in the corner after her outburst, suddenly made a run for the door. She got about 3 steps before Marcus moved to block her way. Mrs. Harrison, running is only going to make this worse for you. Get out of my way. I am not going to jail. You do not have a choice. Marcus grabbed her arm as she tried to shove past him. Officer, she is right in here. Two uniformed police officers walked into the conference room, their faces calm and professional. The female officer stepped forward. Jessica Harrison? That is not me. You have the wrong person. My name is Jennifer. Jennifer Hamilton. The officer held up a photograph. This is you, correct? Jessica's face just fell apart. Please, please, I did not know it was fraud. Ethan told me it was a legitimate consulting job. I was just doing what he told me to do. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use that right. The officer started reading her the Miranda warning while her partner began to handcuff Jessica. Ethan, Jessica screamed as the handcuffs clicked shut. Tell them you forced me to do it. Tell them I had no idea. Ethan was just staring at the table, not even looking at her. I cannot help you, Jessica. I am so sorry. You are sorry? You are sorry? I am going to prison because of you, and all you can say is you are sorry? Jessica lunged at him, but the officers held her back firmly. I hope you rot, Ethan Sterling. I hope you lose everything. I hope. The officers escorted her out of the room, her shouts echoing down the hallway until it was silent. The people still in the conference room sat in a stunned quiet, the reality of what just happened settling over them like a thick, heavy blanket. Victoria broke the silence first. That was intense. Miss Moretti, for the record, did you know the police were on their way? I called them yesterday. I provided every piece of evidence they needed to make an arrest. Jessica Harrison has been stealing from Thornton Marketing for over a year, using her access to cover up fake invoices she and Ethan were creating. She's facing several felony charges. And Mr. Sterling, what charges is he facing? That depends on how cooperative he decides to be with the investigation. If he testifies truthfully about Jessica's role and gives them evidence about the other financial crimes, the prosecutors might be lenient. If he doesn't, Isabella shrugged. Then he'll face the full weight of securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy charges. He could be looking at 20 years. Ethan's head dropped into his hands. 20 years? Oh, God, 20 years. Or you could tell the truth and maybe get 5 years, with parole after 3. Your choice. Daniel's voice was just matter-of-fact, though honestly, given your complete inability to make good decisions, I'd suggest getting a lawyer before you say anything else to anyone. Catherine stood up suddenly, her movements jerky and awkward. I need to leave. I need to go home and think. I need to... She looked around wildly, as if she was trying to remember where she was. My driver. Where's my driver? You dismissed your driver 3 months ago because you couldn't afford to pay him anymore, Isabella said quietly. Don't you remember? No. No, that's not right. I have a driver. I've always had a driver. Not anymore. Would you like me to call you a cab? That offer, delivered in Isabella's calm, professional voice, seemed to be the final straw for Catherine. She let out a sound somewhere between a bitter laugh and a sob. A cab? You're offering to call me a cab.
Do you know who I am?
I am Catherine Sterling. My family has been in this city for 4 generations. I don't ride in cabs.
Then how do you plan to get home?
Isabella asked reasonably. Catherine opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. No sound came out. She looked lost and disoriented, like someone who'd woken up somewhere she didn't recognize. Finally, she whispered, "Call the cab." Marcus stepped out to make the call. The silence in the room felt heavy, broken only by Ethan's ragged breathing and the click of Victoria's typing. Ms. Moretti, Victoria said after a moment, I want to ask about something you said earlier. You mentioned that you stayed because you believed marriage meant sacrifice. Can you elaborate on that? Isabella took a deep breath. I was raised by a father who believed in duty and honor. He taught me that when you make a commitment, you keep it. And when you love someone, you fight for them. So when Ethan started pulling away, When Catherine started her campaign of cruelty, I told myself it was just a test. I thought that if I just loved them enough, worked hard enough, and sacrificed enough, eventually they would see my value. But they never did. Because the problem was not that I wasn't doing enough. The problem was that they had already decided I was not worthy of their respect. Nothing I did was ever going to change that fundamental disrespect. I could have been perfect in every way, and it would not have mattered, because they needed someone to look down on. I served that purpose. Victoria leaned forward. When did you realize the marriage was over? Isabella was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. About 2 years ago, we were at a charity gala, one of Catherine's events. I'd spent 3 weeks planning it, coordinating everything, making sure it was perfect. And it was perfect. The event raised $2.3 million for children's cancer research. At the end of the night, Catherine gave a speech thanking everyone who had helped. She mentioned the caterer, the florist, the venue coordinator, and the musicians. She thanked everyone except me. She paused, and when she continued, her voice was thick with emotion. Ethan was standing right next to me. He heard her thank everyone else. He knew I had done most of the work, and he said nothing. He didn't correct her, didn't acknowledge my contribution, didn't even squeeze my hand in silent support. He just stood there smiling at his mother, proud of her speech. That is when I knew I wasn't invisible by accident. I was invisible by design. They wanted me erased. What did you do? I went to the bathroom and cried for 20 minutes. Then I fixed my makeup, went back out, and smiled for the rest of the night, because that is what I had learned to do. Swallow the pain, hide the hurt, pretend everything was fine. Isabella's hands were trembling slightly. But that night, I also called Daniel. I told him to start preparing exit strategies. I told him that my marriage was over. I just needed to figure out how to end it without destroying myself in the process. Daniel nodded. That is when I started documenting everything, every single instance of verbal abuse, every financial irregularity in Apex Solutions, every asset the Sterling family had, and every debt they owed. I spent 2 years building a case file so comprehensive that when Isabella finally decided to leave, she would be protected, and the hostile takeover. That was not part of the original plan, Isabella admitted. I was going to file for divorce quietly, take my settlement, and just disappear. But then Ethan filed first, and the papers he sent, the $50,000 and the broken apartment, the casual cruelty of it all. Something snapped. I realized that quiet dignity was never going to teach him anything. He would walk away thinking he had won, thinking he had successfully discarded his worthless wife, and he would do it again to the next woman and the next. She looked at Ethan, who was still sitting there with his head in his hands. So, I decided to make sure there was no next woman. I decided to make sure everyone knew the truth about who you are, Ethan, not the charming, successful businessman you pretend to be, the cruel, incompetent fraud you actually are. Ethan's voice came out muffled through his hands. I wasn't always cruel. In the beginning, I tried. I really did try to be a good husband. For about 6 months, Isabella agreed, and then your mother convinced you I was not good enough, and you believed her because it was easier than standing up to her. You chose her over me every single time, every argument, every conflict, every moment where you had to decide between defending your wife and pleasing your mother. You chose her. She is my mother, and I was your wife. I was supposed to be your family, too. But you never treated me like family. You treated me like staff. Well-paid, reasonably well-treated staff, but staff nonetheless. Someone to manage your household and warm your bed and make you look good at social functions. I was never your partner. I was your employee. Catherine's cab arrived. Marcus escorted her to the door, but she paused at the threshold, turning back to look at Isabella. You have destroyed us. I hope you are happy. I am not happy, Isabella said. I am relieved. There's a difference. Catherine left without another word. The room felt larger, somehow emptier without her poisonous presence. Victoria saved her notes and stood. Miss Moretti, thank you for your time. This story is going to run in tomorrow's morning edition, both print and online. I am also going to recommend we do a full feature spread for the weekend magazine. Is that acceptable? It is acceptable. And Mr. Sterling, do you have any comment for the story? Ethan lifted his head slowly. His eyes were red, his face blotchy from crying. Tell them I am sorry. Tell them I was a fool. Tell them Isabella deserved better than me. Tell them all of that. I will. Victoria gathered her things. For what it is worth, Mr. Sterling, I hope you learn something from this. I hope you become a better man, but I also hope you face consequences for your actions. Both things can be true. After Victoria left, only Isabella, Ethan, Daniel, Marcus, and David remained in the conference room. The documents were still spread across the table, physical evidence of the Sterling family's complete collapse. What happens now? Ethan asked quietly. Now you cooperate with the police investigation into Jessica, Daniel said. You testify truthfully about the fraud scheme. You sign over all remaining assets of Apex Solutions to Helios International. You declare personal bankruptcy, and you start looking for a criminal defense attorney because, regardless of your cooperation, you are going to face charges. And my mother? And your mother, Al's, will also declare bankruptcy. She will lose the estate. She will probably have to move into subsidized housing. Her social standing will be destroyed. Her friends will drop her. Everything she cares about most will be gone. Isabella's voice wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind. She'll survive. People like Catherine always do, but she will be humbled. Finally, this will destroy her. No, it won't. It will just force her to live like a normal person instead of a queen. It will be awkward and embarrassing, but it won't destroy her, though I bet she'll wish it had. Ethan stood up, shaking, looking around the room as if he was trying to memorize it. I never should have filed for divorce. If I'd asked questions, if I'd paid attention, if you'd treated me like a person with thoughts and feelings, we wouldn't be here. Isabella finished for him, but you did not, and now you are facing the consequences of your choices. That is how life works, Ethan. Actions have consequences. I loved you, he said quietly. Maybe not how I should have, but I did in my own way. You loved the idea of a wife. You loved having someone there to take care of you. You loved the status that came from being married. But you never loved me. You never even knew me well enough to love me. Isabella stood and gathered her things. Goodbye, Ethan. I truly hope you learn from this and become a better man. But I also hope I never have to see you again. She walked to the door, Daniel and Marcus right behind her. At the doorway, she stopped and looked back one last time. Ethan was standing alone in the conference room, surrounded by the proof of his failures. His face was a mask of grief and regret. For what it is worth, Isabella said softly, I did love you. I really loved you. And that is the worst part. Because it means I wasted 8 years loving someone who was never worth it. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan Sterling alone with the ruins of his own making. Isabella's heels clicked on the marble floor as she crossed the Helios International lobby, Daniel and Marcus on either side of her. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was even. But on the inside, she felt like she was about to fall apart. 8 years of holding it all together, of playing a part, of pretending to be less than she was, and now it was over. The weight of it all was crushing. Are you okay? Daniel's voice was quiet, just for her. I don't know. Ask me again in a year. Isabella pushed through the revolving doors and into the cool night air. The sun was setting, painting the skies with streaks of orange and purple. She'd walked into that building as one person and was now walking out as someone else. Or maybe she was finally walking out as herself again. Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then at Isabella. The stories just hit the internet. Victoria posted it early to get ahead of the story. That was fast. She knew it would spread like wildfire. She wanted the exclusive before anyone else could report on it. Marcus showed her the phone. The headline read, "Secret CEO reveals 8-year marriage to a man who never knew her real identity." And below that, how Isabella Moretti built a billion-dollar empire while her husband treated her like a maid. Isabella's phone began to ring instantly. She glanced at the screen and saw 17 missed calls, all from numbers she did not recognize. "The media has my real number already. That is impressive. Do you want me to take care of it?" Marcus asked. "No, I will have to face them sooner or later. Might as well be now." She answered the next call. "This is Isabella Moretti. Miss Moretti. This is Brad Chen from Financial News Network. We would love to have you on our show tomorrow morning to discuss. I am not doing interviews right now. Thank you for the offer." She hung up and another call came in right away. She rejected it. Then another and another. Daniel gently took the phone from her. "Let me deal with this for tonight. You need to process everything that just happened. What I need is a drink. A very large drink." Isabella headed for the parking garage where her driver was waiting, the same driver who had been on her payroll for 12 years, the one Ethan never even knew existed. "Moretti," a voice called out from behind them. Isabella turned and saw a young woman running toward them, out of breath, holding a notebook. "Please, just one question. How did you keep your identity a secret for so long?" "I did not have a secret identity. I just lived a quiet life. There is a difference." Isabella started walking again. "But you deliberately hid who you were. You lied to your husband." Isabella stopped and slowly turned around. "I never lied. I just did not offer information he never bothered to ask for. There is a difference between lying and letting people believe what they already want to believe. My husband never asked about my education, my past, or my skills. He just assumed I was simple because it suited his story about himself. I let him believe it because I wanted to see if he could love me for who he thought I was, not what I had. And could he? No. He could not even love that smaller version of me. So imagine how much less he would have loved the real me." Isabella turned and kept walking, without looking back. The drive to her real home took 40 minutes. It was not the Sterling mansion where she'd spent the last 8 years of her life, but the penthouse apartment she'd kept during her entire marriage. Ethan never knew about it. He never asked where she was during her yoga classes or shopping trips. He simply never cared enough to wonder. The doorman greeted her with a friendly smile. "Welcome home, Miss Moretti. It is good to see you again. It is good to be seen, Martin." "Thank you." She rode the elevator to the top floor, watching her reflection in the mirrored walls. She looked the same as she did this morning, but everything was different. The door opened right into her apartment, 3,000 square feet of modern elegance that was all hers. Daniel and Marcus came in behind her. "Do you want us to stay?" Daniel asked. "No, I need some time alone. But thank you for everything. For keeping my secrets, for building this case, for standing by me when I must have seemed crazy for staying with him so long." "You did not seem crazy," Daniel said softly. "You seemed heartbroken. There is a difference." After they were gone, Isabella poured a scotch and stood by the huge windows that looked out over the city. Somewhere out there, Ethan was probably still in that conference room, trying to figure out how his whole life had just crumbled. Somewhere out there, Catherine was in a cab heading back to a house that would be taken from her in a few months. Somewhere out there, Jessica was being booked into the criminal justice system, and here she stood in her own home, drinking expensive scotch. She had won, but she did not feel happy. Not at all. Her phone rang again. This time, it was a number she knew, her best friend Sarah, who she had barely spoken to in 8 years, because keeping up her life with Ethan meant cutting off everyone who knew the real her. "Sarah?" Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Izzy, I just saw the article. Are you okay? Where are you? Do you need me to come? I am home. My real home. And yes, I could really use a friend. I am on my way. 20 minutes. Sarah showed up in 15 with 2 bottles of wine and a bag of takeout food. She took one look at Isabella's face and gave her a huge hug. You did it. You actually did it. I am so proud of you and so mad that it took you this long. They sat on the couch, eating Chinese food out of the boxes, and for the first time in 8 years, Isabella felt like she could actually breathe. I wasted so much time, Sarah. 8 years of my life are just gone. You did not waste it. You learned from it. There is a difference. Everyone keeps telling me there is a difference between things. I am starting to believe there is not. A lie is a lie. Wasted time is wasted time. No. A lie is meant to deceive someone. What you did was protect yourself, and time you spend learning who you do not want to be is not wasted. It is an education. An expensive one, but still an education. Sarah poured more wine for both of them. Besides, look at what you built during those 8 years. Helios is worth twice as much. You moved into 12 new markets. You are more successful now than you were when you married him. I am also more damaged. Damaged is not the same as destroyed. You are still here. You are still standing. That is what counts. Isabella's phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. The story has over 2.3 million views in the last 3 hours. You are trending on every social media site. The board wants to set up a press conference for Monday morning. She showed the text to Sarah, who started, laughing. You are famous. How does that feel? Terrifying. I spent 8 years in hiding. Now everyone knows everything. Not everything. They might know the facts, but they don't know the pain. They have no idea about the nights you cried yourself to sleep, or the times Catherine hit you and you had to pretend everything was okay. They just don't get the real cost. Maybe that's for the best. Some things should stay private. Another text buzzed, this one from Daniel. Ethan tried to call me. He wants to talk to you. What should I say? Isabella quickly typed back, tell him I have nothing to say to him. Not now, not ever. Sarah read the message over her shoulder. Ooh, cold. I love it. What do you think he wants anyway? Forgiveness. Probably. Or maybe he's trying to salvage what's left. It doesn't matter. I am done with him. Isabella put her phone down and picked up her wine glass. Do you know what the worst part is? I still feel guilty, Pink. Even after everything. And, knowing he never truly loved me, I feel guilty for ruining his life. That's because you're a good person. Good people feel guilty even when they've done the right thing. It doesn't mean you were wrong. It means you have a conscience, which is more than anyone can say for Ethan. They talked long into the night, with Sarah filling Isabella in on 8 years of missed friendship. Isabella felt the tension slowly drain from her body. By the time Sarah left at midnight, Isabella felt a little more human again. But sleep did not come. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, playing every single moment of the day over in her head. The look on Ethan's face when he realized who she was. The sound of Jessica getting arrested. Catherine's desperate begging. The sheer weight of the signed divorce papers. Her phone buzzed again at 2 in the morning. A text from a number she did not recognize. Isabella, it is Ethan. I know you do not want to talk to me, but please just read this. I understand now what I did to you. I understand I destroyed something precious because I was too blind and arrogant to see what was right in front of me. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am not asking for another chance. I just need you to know I am sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. You deserved so much better than me. You deserved everything, and I gave you nothing. I will spend the rest of my life regretting that. I hope you find someone who sees you the way I should have seen you. Someone who appreciates you the way I should have. Someone who loves you the way I was never able to love you. You were right about everything. I was cruel and incompetent, and I destroyed everyone who trusted me. I am going to try to be better. I do not know if I can, but I will try. Not for you. You do not owe me anything, but for the next person, so I do not destroy someone else the way I destroyed you. I am sorry, Isabella. I am so sorry. She read the message 3 times and then deleted it without a reply. Words were easy. Actions were what mattered, and Ethan's actions had shown her exactly who he was. An apology could not change 8 years of cruelty. The next morning, Isabella woke up to find her face on the front page of every major newspaper. The headlines were different, but the story was the same. A billionaire CEO reveals her secret marriage. Her husband is shocked to learn his wife's real identity. A hidden mogul emerges after 8 years of silence. Her phone was flooded with interview requests, speaking invitations, and messages from people she had not spoken to in years. Old colleagues congratulated her, former classmates expressed their shock, and total strangers offered either support or condemnation. Marcus called at 7. The press conference is scheduled for 10. Are you ready? No, but I will do it anyway. That is the spirit. Your public relations team prepared talking points. Daniel reviewed them for any legal issues. We are as ready as we can be. The press conference was held in the main auditorium at Helios International, a room that could hold 300 people. Every seat was filled, with reporters lining the walls and camera crews fighting for position. Isabella stood backstage, her hands clenched into fists, trying to calm her racing heart. You do not have to do this, Daniel said quietly. We can cancel. We can release a written statement instead. No. If I hide now, I will be hiding forever. I spent 8 years hiding. I am done hiding. She squared her shoulders and walked onto the stage. The camera flashes were blinding. Questions were shouted from every direction before she even reached the podium. She held up a hand for silence, and, miraculously, the room quieted. Thank you all for coming. I am going to make a brief statement, and then I will take questions. She pulled out her prepared notes, then folded them and set them aside. This needed to come from her heart, not from a script. My name is Isabella Moretti. I am the founder and CEO of Helios International, a position I have held for 13 years. I am also recently divorced from Ethan Sterling, a man who spent 8 years married to me without knowing who I really was. Many of you have asked why I hid my identity. The answer is simple and complicated. I hid because I wanted to know if someone could love me for myself, not for my name, my money, or my connections. I wanted to be seen as a person, not an asset. She paused, gripping the sides of the podium. What I learned is that some people cannot see you, no matter how visible you make yourself. Some people have already decided who you are, and no amount of evidence will change their minds. My former husband decided I was simple, uneducated, and worthless. He treated me accordingly. His mother abused me emotionally and physically, and I stayed because I believed love meant sacrifice. Her voice strengthened. But here is what I want everyone, especially women, to understand. Love does not mean erasing yourself. Love does not mean accepting abuse. Love does not mean making yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. Real love sees you. Real love respects you. Real love lifts you up, not tears you down. Someone in the audience started clapping, then someone else. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding. Isabella waited for it to die down before continuing. I am sharing my story not because I want sympathy, but because I want accountability. I want people to understand that abuse does not always look like bruises and broken bones. Sometimes it looks like being dismissed. Sometimes it looks like mockery disguised as jokes. Sometimes it looks like someone telling you that your thoughts, your feelings, and your entire existence does not matter. That is abuse, too, and it leaves scars just as deep. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. Miss Moretti, do you regret the marriage? I regret staying as long as I did. I do not regret trying. There is honor in trying to make something work. There is no honor in staying when someone is actively destroying you. What about Apex Solutions? Are you planning to rebuild it or shut it down? We are restructuring. The company has good bones, but terrible management. We will be installing new leadership, cleaning up the financial irregularities, and refocusing on the core business model. We expect to return to profitability within 18 months. And Ethan Sterling, have you spoken to him since the divorce? No, I have nothing to say to him. Some people are saying you are vindictive, that you deliberately destroyed his life out of spite. Isabella's jaw tightened. I revealed the truth about who he is and what he did. If the truth destroyed him, that is on him, not me. I did not create his debts. I did not force him to commit fraud. I did not make him treat his wife like garbage. He did all of that himself. I simply stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. Another reporter stood. Miss Moretti, there are rumors that you are planning to write a book about your experience. I have not decided yet. Right now, I am focused on moving forward, not looking back. What about other women in similar situations? What would you tell them? Isabella took a deep breath. I would tell them that their worth is not determined by how others treat them. I would tell them that staying in a bad situation does not make them weak, but leaving makes them strong. I would tell them that they deserve to be seen, heard, and valued. And I would tell them that it is never too late to reclaim their lives. The questions continued for another 30 minutes, Isabella answering each one with careful honesty. By the time it ended, she felt exhausted, but lighter somehow. The secret was out. The truth was known. There was no going back now. That evening, Marcus forwarded her an email from the Apex Solutions Board of Directors. They were formally accepting Helios International's acquisition offer and requesting Isabella's personal involvement in the restructuring process. They want you specifically, Marcus wrote. They know you can save the company. She wrote back, tell them I will do it. Not for Ethan, for the employees who do not deserve to lose their jobs because their CEO was incompetent. 3 days later, Isabella walked into the Apex Solutions building for the first time in 8 years. She had been here before, of course, attending company events as Ethan's wife, standing quietly in the corner while he worked. But now she walked through the front door as the owner, and the difference was striking. The employees stared. Some recognized her from the news coverage. Others were just confused about who this woman was and why she was walking through their office like she owned it, which, technically, she did. Good morning, she said to the receptionist. I am Isabella Moretti. I am here to meet with the department heads. The receptionist's eyes widened. Oh, Miss Moretti? Yes, of course. They are waiting for you in the main conference room, top floor. Isabella rode the elevator up, remembering all the times she had ridden this same elevator to bring Ethan his forgotten lunch or his laptop or whatever he had left at home that day. She had been invisible then, just another woman running errands. Now everyone was watching her. The conference room was full. 20 department heads, all looking nervous and uncertain. Most of them had worked under Ethan for years. They had heard him talk about his wife, heard him diminish her, heard him mock her, and now she was their boss. Good morning, Isabella said, taking her seat at the head of the table. I am sure you all have questions. Let me start by addressing the obvious one. Yes, I am the woman who was married to Ethan Sterling. Yes, he had no idea who I really was. And yes, I am now the majority owner of this company, but none of that matters as much as this. Apex Solutions is failing. You all know it. The question is whether we are going to save it or let it die. A man in his 50s raised his hand. Miss Moretti, with all due respect, most of us have been here longer than Mr. Sterling. We know what is broken. The question is whether you will listen to us, or if you are just going to come in here and make the same mistakes he made. I'm actually going to listen. That's the main difference between me and your old CEO. I value expertise. So, this is what is going to happen. Each of you will write a report on your department. What is working, what is broken, and what you need to fix it. I don't want any sugarcoating and no corporate speak, just honest assessments. You have 1 week. Then we are going to sit down together and rebuild this company the right way. A younger woman spoke up. What about the employees who were part of the fraud?
Are you firing all of them?
I'm firing everyone who broke the law. I'm keeping everyone who was just doing their job. This company's problems started at the top, not the bottom. Most of you were lied to about this company's finances. That's not your fault. But from now on, we will be transparent. No more secret debts, no more fake numbers. Everything will be out in the open. The meeting went on for 3 hours. By the end, Isabella saw exactly how badly Ethan had ruined things. It was much worse than anyone had first reported. The company was basically a house of cards, held up by nothing but lies and desperation. But it wasn't a lost cause. With the right management, honest bookkeeping, and a smart restructure, Apex Solutions could be profitable again. It would just take time, effort, and money. For the next 6 months, Isabella completely devoted herself to the work. She hired new leaders, brought in auditors to fix the financial records, renegotiated supplier contracts, and met with every single major client to promise them that Apex Solutions was under new, better management. It was exhausting, with 16-hour days and almost no weekends off. But it was also satisfying in a way her work at Helios never was. This wasn't just about business. This was personal. Every job she saved felt like a small win against Ethan's failure. Every contract she rescued was proof that she could fix what he broke. Every single quarter that showed growth felt like justice. The media attention didn't stop for months. Isabella's face was on magazine covers. She was on television, featured in podcasts, and discussed in business schools. The story of the secret CEO became a huge cultural moment, starting conversations about gender, power, and hidden abuse in marriage. Some people called her a hero, while others called her bitter. She ignored them both and just focused on her work. She never spoke a word to Ethan again. She found out through Daniel that he took a plea deal, testifying against Jessica to get a lighter sentence. He served 18 months in a low-security prison for his part in the fraud. Catherine went bankrupt, lost the family home, and had to move into a tiny apartment in a rough neighborhood. All of her wealthy friends abandoned her almost overnight. Isabella felt absolutely nothing when she heard about it. Not happy, not sorry, just nothing. They had become completely irrelevant to her life, just footnotes in her story. 2 years after the divorce, Sarah called with some wild news. Guess who I just saw at the coffee shop? Ethan Sterling. Isabella's hand gripped on the phone tighter, and he looks awful. I mean, really awful. He's lost weight, his hair's going gray, and he was wearing a cheap suit. He asked about you. He wanted to know how you were. What did you say? I told him you were thriving. I told him you were building empires, changing the world, and living your absolute best life. He looked like I just punched him right in the stomach. Good. He said he thinks about you every single day, that he wishes he could turn back time and do it all differently. Well, he can't. That's not how time works. Isabella paused. Did he seem sincere? Yeah, actually. He seemed genuinely sorry. Broken, even. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. I don't wish him any harm. I just wish him gone from my life. If he has learned something, if he's a better person now, that's great. But it doesn't change what he did to me. It doesn't undo 8 years of abuse, and it definitely doesn't mean I owe him anything. Not even a thought. I basically told him that, but not as nicely. I'm pretty sure I called him a worthless waste of air. Isabella couldn't help but laugh. You're a good friend, Sarah. The best. So, when are you going to start dating again? It's been 2 years. You can't just hide in your office forever. I'm not hiding. I'm healing. There is a difference. 3 years after the divorce, Isabella was on stage at a women's business conference, giving the main speech. 5,000 women packed the auditorium, all of them eager to hear her story. People often ask me if I regret hiding who I was for 8 years, she said, her voice filling the huge room. And the answer is complicated. I regret the abuse that I went through. I regret that I stayed for as long as I did, but I don't regret trying to be loved for who I was. That isn't a weakness. That is just being human. She paused, looking across the huge crowd. What I learned from all this is simple. You cannot make someone see your value if they have already decided you have none. You cannot force someone to respect you if they've already decided you are beneath them. And you can never make someone love you if they can't even see you as a complete person. What you can do is see when you are in that trap and choose to get out. Choose to value yourself, especially when others don't. Choose to build a life that doesn't need anyone else's permission. The applause was like thunder. After her speech, dozens of women came up to her with their own stories of quiet abuse, of being made to feel small, and of their battles to reclaim their own self-worth. Isabella listened to everyone, offering them her support. That night, alone in her hotel room, she thought about Ethan for the very last time. She didn't feel anger or bitterness, but something more like understanding. He was raised by a woman who taught him that power was about dominance, that love was about control, and that marriage was about ownership. He never learned any better because he never had to. But that wasn't her problem to solve anymore. She had spent 8 years trying to teach him to be a better man. She was done with that job. If he wanted to change, he would have to do it on his own. 4 years after the divorce, Isabella fully merged Apex Solutions into Helios International, finishing an integration that took years of hard work. The former Apex employees were now Helios employees, and most of them were thriving under competent leaders. The company that Ethan almost destroyed was now one of the most profitable parts of Helios. Isabella celebrated by taking a month-long trip to Italy, the first real vacation she'd had in over 10 years. She walked through Florence with no set plans, ate pasta in little local restaurants, and slowly remembered how it felt to be just Isabella, not the CEO, not the hidden wife, just herself. On her final night in Florence, she was sitting at a cafe with a glass of wine when her phone rang. Daniel's name was on the screen. "I'm on vacation," she answered. "This had better be important." "It is. Ethan Sterling died yesterday. A heart attack. He was 42. Isabella put her wine glass down very carefully. "I see. Catherine found him. He'd been living with her in that little apartment. They have no money for a funeral. She's asking if Helios might cover the costs." "No," Isabella said. "No," she repeated, her voice firm. "I am not paying for his funeral. I am not going to his funeral, and I am not saying a single word about his death publicly. He spent 8 years of his life making me feel like I did not exist. I am simply returning the favor. That's harsh. That's fair." She paused. "But send Catherine $5 anonymously. Enough to have him cremated and hold a small service. She is his mother. Whatever her faults, she did love him. That is more than I can say. You're a better person than they deserved. No, I'm just not them. There's a difference." Isabella hung up the phone and finished her wine, watching the sun set over the Tuscan hills. She felt nothing at all about Ethan's death. Not sadness, not relief, not even a sense of victory, just a void where he used to be. And maybe that was the best result. He had taken up far too much of her life for far too long. Now he was gone, and that space was finally all hers. 5 years after the divorce, Isabella stood in front of a brand new building. She watched as workers unveiled the sign. The Isabella Moretti Center for Women's Economic Empowerment. She had paid for it all herself, $40 million to help women start businesses, escape abusive situations, and rebuild their lives. Sarah stood next to her. tears running down her face. "Your dad would be so proud. I hope so. I spent so many years running from his legacy, trying to be someone else. I am done hiding. This is me. This is what I was always supposed to do." Daniel came over, handing Isabella a folder. "The final divorce decree. All the assets are officially transferred. All legal matters are closed. It's over, Izzy. It's finally, completely over." She took the folder and, without even opening it, dropped it into the nearest trash can. It was over the day I walked out of that meeting. This is just paperwork. That evening, Isabella held a dinner at her penthouse for the people who had stood by her through it all. Sarah, Daniel, Marcus, David, and a dozen others who kept her secret, supported her, and helped her rebuild. They ate, they drank, they laughed, and they celebrated. It wasn't just her survival, it was her victory. "To Isabella," Marcus said, raising his glass, "who showed us all that quiet is not weak, that unseen is not powerless, and that the person they tried to erase became someone impossible to ignore." "To Isabella," everyone repeated. She looked around the table at the faces of people who truly saw her, who valued her, who loved her for who she was. This was her family. This was her home. This was what she had been looking for this whole time. And she had it all along, buried under the pressure of trying to be someone else. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing me when I couldn't even see myself, for believing in me when I had lost all belief, for reminding me that I was never the person he claimed I was. I was always this person. I just forgot for a little while." Later that night, alone again, Isabella stood by her windows, gazing out at the sparkling city lights. Somewhere out there, Catherine Sterling was mourning her son. Somewhere out there, Jessica Harrison was serving her prison sentence. And somewhere out there, countless women were going through what she had, thinking it was normal, believing it was love. She knew she couldn't save all of them, but she could try. She could tell her story. She could provide resources. She could create new opportunities. She could be visible so that other women didn't have to be invisible. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Victoria Chen. "It's the 5-year anniversary. Are you interested in reflecting on what's changed?" Isabella typed back, "Everything's changed. I'm not the woman I was, but maybe I'm finally the woman I was always meant to be." She put her phone down and smiled at her reflection in the dark window. Isabella Moretti, billionaire, CEO, survivor, and fighter, no longer hiding, no longer small, no longer sorry for taking up space in a world that tried so hard to erase her. Ethan Sterling had divorced her without a clue that she owned a multi-billion-dollar company. For 8 long years, his family humiliated her. They treated her like she was nothing, called her worthless, and threw her away like trash. And now, she stood at the head of an empire she built herself, surrounded by people who valued her, living a life more successful and fulfilling than they could ever possibly imagine. While they had lost everything they once cared about, she hadn't just survived their cruelty, she had risen above it. And that, Isabella thought, as she turned from the window and toward the life she had reclaimed, was the sweetest victory of all. Sonnet 4.5.